So recording. Great. Okay, so welcome everyone to the second UEF 2021 Steering Committee. Thank you so much everyone for joining us here to continue to work towards UEF 2021 that'll happen on October 4th and 5th. I greatly appreciate everyone's continued efforts to support UEF as well as my multiple emails to you with some requests. Before we kind of kick off the meetings here, as I said, we're just recording our meeting, which I said, and then I'd also like to take a screenshot. So if everyone can turn on your cameras and perhaps give a nice smile, and we will take screenshots. Everyone smile. I have to do 3 here. Everyone. One more. And okay, I got a lot there. Okay, perhaps Ms. Julie Ward, if you would like to maybe share a few remarks, and then we can move to the UEF Secretariat before we get started.
Okay, right. I don't want to take too long because we've got an hour for discussion, haven't we, after your presentation, Alex? I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, just to say how much it is appreciated that people from so many different parts of the world, but also people with so many different experiences and knowledge come together to help create this forum. I think we're grappling with a lot of issues at the minute, but we are making really interesting, good progress. And I was amazed to see when Alex sent the presentation yesterday for me to have a brief look at it, that we've already got 100 confirmed speakers. And I'm a little bit concerned, actually, so maybe I just need to note my concern now. 100 speakers seems like an awful lot in 3 days. And what I suppose one of the things that I'd really like us to concentrate on is how we can bring different themes and ideas together, and how we can also maybe put some unlikely partners in the same space as well, so that we can maybe provoke some responses that you know, and be prepared for some responses that we didn't necessarily expect. So I think the programming is going to be everything. How we program, because there's lots of people with lots to say, lots of provocations, lots of questions, and there'll be lots of people wanting to comment on all of that as well. So I think the programming is going to be really, really important. I'm glad that we've elevated the issue of youth in the forthcoming forum, that we've opened it up, made it more social rather than just technical. I think that's really, really important, putting youth and homelessness into the agenda and into the title and into the forward. I think demonstrates that we understand we're not just talking about something, a sort of technical planning issue here, but we're talking about people's lives, and that ought to be at the forefront of all the work that we do together, is people's lives, how people's lives can be made better by the different policies that we can promote, that we can and the different ideas that we can learn from each other. So maybe just keep people at the forefront of our minds today. That would be good. Okay.
Thanks, Julie. Does Mayor Jan, do you have anything you'd like to briefly state? Okay, I think Mayor Jan is just having some technical difficulties there. Okay, Krishnan, would you like to, as the Secretary General of UEF, would you like to say anything?
I mean, just I think we can start off the meeting in all earnest. So I also agree with the chair, co-chair Julie, in saying to see that the urban economy forums third meeting's focus should be action-oriented as well as people-oriented, focusing on the living conditions. And one of the things that we discussed, we did not complete in the last meeting, was that, how to ensure the housing for all in the post-COVID context, presenting examples and what we can come out of this meeting in an action-oriented way, and this is where I think the focus should be, and linking it up with the safe and accessible neighborhoods as well as sustainable urban planning and management. So the basic thing is social and economic conditions of people have been drastically affected, especially in the developing countries, where majority of the people in cities are living in houses that cannot be considered decent homes. So if post-COVID-19 does not present an opportunity, when else can this happen? This is a thing for us. An impressive number of people will be participating in the Urban Economy Forum. So it is important that all of us here try to see that elevate the status of the deliberations meeting from being a talking shop in an action-oriented event, where we come out of that, we can say that we did manage to see that these things will happen at the policy level, at the practical level, by exchanging experiences, as well as trying to see how we can work with governments at the local and national level, as well as with community groups, trying to see that the post-COVID recovery does happen with focus on housing for all kinds of things. As Julie again said, homelessness is a major issue, and with people who had homes, but homelessness is always an issue in many parts of the world, in the developing world, you see. So especially it has been made much more difficult in that context. Then again, we also try to see that we may want to move away from the kind of tokenism to practicing what we say. So it's easy to talk about young people, indigenous communities, women, how important issues are, write pages after pages, treatise on them. But has there been examples that we can learn from? What can be done to empower these groups in making society sustainable? So I think that's where I believe we have an impressive number of people who have already said they'll be participating, and the program is yet to be made. So it's up to the steering committee here to decide. We are depending on your guidance to see how you go from here. And because this is an important meeting, because this will set the tone for the finalization of the program, and who could be the important people to be invited if already not been done, and to see that the meeting becomes a success, because it is ultimately your decision that will have impact on how the meeting will go. We are here as a secretariat to sort of help you in this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Krishnan. Okay, before we turn it over to Julie Ward to continue to chair the meeting, I am going to just quickly provide a brief overview of the current progress to date. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can see that. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, so we are gathering here for the second meeting of UEF 2021 Steering Committee, talking about the third Urban Economy Forum, which is focused on housing and urban recovery. So just a brief agenda for our meeting, which I shared with everyone previously. Just a quick overview of the third Urban Economy Forum progress. And then we'll move to the Steering Committee suggestions and ideas to enrich UEF 2021. Where we encourage you to share your ideas and suggestions about the annual forum, including your participation, various network speakers, and outreach. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about UEF 2021 resolution, the organizational structure, and preparing this document, which we do at every annual forum. Updates on the UEF 2021 progress to date. So we continue to organize preparatory meetings to increase awareness about UEF 2021. Just to provide a couple of examples, UEF joined UN Habitat, as well as several other institutions, on ending youth homelessness, looking at policies, measures, and success factors back in April. We also organized Creativity for Urban Future, which focused on innovative ideas and financial models for sustainable urban housing. As well, we co-organized with Top Tier Impact, the impact economy on SDGs and urbanization in Asia Pacific. As well, several of our SC members also joined us for this. And then finally, UEF participated at the Climate Expo, focusing on localizing the circular economy, again, with support of many of our steering committee members. So we continue to appreciate SC members' support in this regard. So we have also informed UEF 2021 audience about the 3rd annual forum. So we've reached out to capital city mayors and major city mayors across the globe and informed them about UEF. We also informed ministers of cities, urban development and/or housing from national governments, leading universities and faculties on sustainable urban development and resources, major financial institutions and banks, and then as well as non-governmental sector from both UN and non-UN agencies. So we already have nearly 100+ speakers already confirmed. There's a great interest of individuals looking to participate and share their innovation at UEF at the 3rd annual forum. So just a highlight of some of these individuals, as you can see here, a number of ministers have confirmed to participate. Minister of Housing, Instruction and Sanitation of Peru, Minister of Housing and Local Government in Malaysia, Barbados, Syria, Fiji, Greece. So a number of national governments are interested and wanting to come to this national global forum. As well as we have a number of mayors from cities who's confirmed to join us and showing interest. So Mayor of Kigali, Seville, Spain, Sydney, Australia, Fan, Belize, just to highlight some of the individuals, as well as presidents of universities and deans. We have the president and CEO of International Institute for Sustainable Development as well. So a number of speakers who are interested to join us. So just moving to the UEF 2021 proposed program. So as everyone knows, it's organized around 5 themes that was previously discussed at the UEF 2021 SC meeting: urban economy and global pandemic, housing and urban economy, building forward better in a world of pandemics, climate change and urban economy, innovation, governance and urban economy, rethinking urban paradigms, and public participation and community empowerment for equitable growth. This is not new. We shared this previously following the first steering committee meeting. So we have outlined our first draft of what the program could be. So just to highlight how we see it is the program is completely flexible. So we can increase or reduce parallel sessions based on demand, and this will make more sense when I show the diagram. Sessions will run on average for about 1 hour and 45. The session format is completely flexible. It can be keynote, plenary, workshop, panel, speaker series, debate. It really is up to the session organizers and the UEF Secretariat. We want to highlight that one major session will highlight the introduction of Regent Park World Urban Pavilion, as well as we plan on holding a mayoral roundtable as well as a ministerial roundtable. And then, of course, the resolution will be drafted in the afternoon of the 3rd day. Sorry, in the morning of the 3rd day. That just needs to change there. So this is the proposed program. And if I could just walk you through it quickly. We have our opening, might be a little small, apologies for that. Opening session, we'll move to a keynote speaker series, which will take place both in the morning. We will then introduce what we call theme sessions, and it can be either of those 5 themes, and they'll run in parallel. So 2 in parallel on the afternoon of day 1. On the 2nd day, we'll open up to keynote speaker series 2. We'll then also host a ministerial roundtable in parallel with another theme session. Moving to the afternoon, we'll have, again, move to our theme sessions, as well as the mayoral roundtable, which will run in parallel. And then finally, in the morning of the 3rd day, we'll do our resolution drafting. And then finally, the UEF 2021 closing. So that's our general suggestion for the program. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And then finally, just ending off the presentation here, as we said before, we appreciate everyone's continued support for UEF's events, engagement activities, and the annual forum. as I have reached out to everybody, and many of you have already shared the video, just a reminder to those who haven't, requesting all SC members to share a brief 1 to 2 minute video about UEF 2021. As you can see here, this is our co-chair, Julie Ward, down here, her video on our Twitter post. So thank you everyone who's done that. And then finally, there's still room for SC nominations for speakers at UEF 2021. Some of you have shared speakers, and we're reaching out to them. And those who have not shared, there's still room. Perhaps I can ask Ilda to just share our nomination form in the chat box. And then you guys can, everyone can fill out that chat, and then we can proceed from there. Okay, so that is the presentation. And then I would just like to turn it back over to Julie Ward to proceed with the second portion of the agenda to hear everyone's ideas about going forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Alex. So we've now got some time to have a discussion really about how we can make the best use of this program, how we can enrich the program, how we can, you know, can we see any gaps in the program that we could fill? Are there other responses we need to make? You know, issues that have come up which are related. I think we've got about an hour for this, haven't we, Alex? Is that about right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I have prior notice of a few people wishing to speak, and I'm going to give the floor to them first of all, but then I hope that the rest of you might want to respond. You might have things that you know that you think about because of the way the discussion is already going. So I'm going to ask the Mayor of Helsinki to speak first. Is Jan here? I can't see, I'm working on a little screen, I'm afraid. Is Jan with us? Is he with us, Alex? Do you know?
You know, I think he's having some technical difficulties here.
Yeah, I think okay, I'm going to move on then. Is Lisa here, the Mayor of Victoria? I can't see everybody on my...
Yes, I'm here.
Lisa.
Good morning.
Okay, I'm going to give the floor to you to kick off then, really, just to start off this discussion about, if you like, the enrichment program, which I think is really important and addresses what both Krishna and I think, which is we don't want this to end up being a kind of tick box technocratic exercise, but to have some real meat and some real power. Okay, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julie. Good morning, everyone from Victoria, British Columbia, the territories of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. A number of us from this working group got together coming out of the February meeting and put together a panel that really features and focuses people with lived experience of homelessness and housing insecurity. So Frank from ISOCARP, Maddie from the U of T School of Cities, Mary from the Canadian Urban Institute, and myself have put together what we propose. And I guess it probably looks like one of those concurrent bubble sessions, but our hope actually was that it could be somewhat of a plenary, so that the conference itself could be grounded in experiences of people who have been homeless or who are homeless. So we've put together, it'll be an interesting format because we have 4 people with lived experience of homelessness, 3 in Canada, 1 in Glasgow. So it is definitely like developing world. We're not from that part of the world. And so if there's anyone who wants to create a concurrent panel or expand it to have people from the global south, that would be most welcome. But at this point, it does focus on the global north. And so our idea is to have, and it's more than idea, we've confirmed just about all the speakers, but to have people with lived experience of homelessness and housing insecurity talking about what does housing mean? what does lived experience mean and what does a right to housing mean? So from their perspectives, and then to have policy experts in those areas kind of interacting in real time with people with lived experience. So we kind of get the on the ground and then the analysis at the same time. So we put together a 90-minute session. Again, we were hoping it could be a plenary so that it would kind of ground everybody at the very beginning of the 2.5 days in the voices of people who have living experiences of homelessness. But if it doesn't shake down that way, I guess we're okay with that. But yeah, that's the update. And thanks, Julie, very much. And thanks to Frank and Maddie and Mary, who've been working alongside me to put this panel together.
That's great, Lisa. Okay, I'm really glad you spoke first. I'm very much of a mind that we need to take account of lived experience, and if we could have this session early on and have some, and have the policy makers and the decision makers, the powers in the same room responding would be fantastic. As I'm chair, I'm going to use my chair's privilege here, and I would like to suggest a fantastic organisation based in the UK who do street opera, and they've been working with a global arts and homelessness project. So using the arts to tell the stories really about homeless people, but also the arts as a means of elevating people's dignity. So it would be great to not only have that kind of discussion, but also maybe to have a kind of a creative performance social event as well. So I've made a note to myself to get in touch with you about that. So now I'll move on. Is Roger Vandenberg here? Director of Urban Development at World Resources Institute?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm talking to you all from my garden in Rotterdam, so I'm sitting outside. The weather is good. Pleasure to be with you. I just want to make a point. I've seen the program and I just want to see where we are at, because I keep reiterating the point that I think it would be great if we don't come out this urban economy forum with only good ideas, and enlightenment, but also with kind of some really kind of factual opportunities. And I want to kind of reiterate the point that green construction and retrofit, they have the biggest abatement potential and the biggest job creator. And we did some numbers and developed some data with the Coalition for Urban Transitions behind it. In September, released this report, the economic case for greening the global recovery through cities. And I really think that provides a very good insight on what a huge opportunity there is if you connect, the housing crisis with the climate crisis. And especially because if you do that right, it gives you a different take on how you potentially finance this. So kind of resolving the housing crisis, looking at, the climate finance is really a real opportunity, and especially in COVID recovery. So I've seen the program. So it also relates a little bit on what Krishnan said in the beginning. Let's not only talk, what are the kind of factual opportunities that we have here? Because housing is a topic that we all like to talk about, and how inclusive it should be, and it should be kind of embedded in neighborhoods with good urban planning. But let's try to come out of this forum with factual opportunities. What's the biggest bang for the buck? Sorry to be so Dutch over here. But I think that's my point. So connecting the housing crisis to the climate crisis very pragmatically. I paste later 2 documents that I think are valuable to this discussion. I think the work of the Coalition for Urban Transitions is very, very valuable input for this discussion. And I'm also wondering another question, and then I'll close the question, is where in the agenda I see climate and urban economy, but I think the point I raise is a bit of different angle to that. Thanks a lot for the attention.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the themes is climate, if I'm not mistaken. So I can see a place for this if it's really connecting with climate. I think many of the sessions will have, many of the themes will come forward with data and evidence and research. So I think there will be a lot of, you know, numbers, if you like, and facts throughout the whole conference. I'm sensing that because the movement that we've built, the world that we're drawing from is a world that is full of people who've got extraordinary research backgrounds and who are doing research now. So I think maybe the session you're talking about sounds like it ought to be within the climate change theme and being very, very explicit about that. That's what you're saying, is to be explicit. And the next thing, the other thing that we should be doing is constantly reiterating the challenges and the opportunities of the post-COVID world. So that's something that needs to run, if you like, horizontally through the whole conference. You know, we can't talk about anything now without talking about the world that we will, you know, that we will be making after, you know, after COVID. So I think that, yeah, I think what you're saying, Roger, is really, really important, actually. But I already see that the theme has been identified, so good. And I'm just looking at my list. Camilla, you're on my list as well.
Yeah.
Camilla, who's in London, I presume. Are you in London, Camilla?
I am in London, yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you see me? Is my video on? Can you hear me?
Yeah. We can see you and hear you well. So
yeah, just a couple of points I wanted to make. I think it's really important that we broaden the context of the housing so that we think about not just the built fabric that people are going to be living in, but actually the community around them. So the urban realm and all of that. So we've got to think about the outside urban realm, how that urban realm can support community. Because when we're talking about home, actually home is also what you do just outside your home, where you meet your friends and so on. So I think we need to explore all of that. I think, and also local amenities. So when you're building a new development, it's not just housing, but it's got to have all the things that you need to actually feel that you're living in a neighborhood that is your home. I think one of the things we really need to explore, which perhaps could be a little separate session, is affordability, costs of actually how do you engage in the housing as a user? Are you going to own it? Are you going to rent it? Or can we explore other models? Because I think there's very poor understanding of what the other models are. There are other models out there, and I know there are lots of people that have explored them, but I think that needs to be highlighted clearly. There is a great stigma in parts of the world about sort of renting, so overcoming that stigma particularly, it's very common in Europe, and yet if you're in Britain, you know, a successful person would not think they're successful if they're still renting their flat. I mean, it's absurd. And the last thing I want to say was also is in that sort of climate section is we need to consider climate friendly construction. So how we build lots of housing, but that is not going to exacerbate the climate crisis. Those were the sort of main points that I wanted to raise.
okay, thanks very much. Yeah, that wider urban realm, local amenities, very important actually. I think that loneliness has become a pandemic as well. Certainly in the UK, even before we had COVID, we had a crisis of loneliness, and I think many people have been experiencing that even more during the crisis, and how we respond to that as policymakers, town planners, activists, also campaigners, is going to be really, really important. The spaces and the places for people to meet and work together, and for us to rebuild. You know, certainly in the UK, we're a very divided society now. We know the importance and the urgent need to rebuild those connections. So if we know, is Nathaniel here, founder of Freak Cities channel. Have I got Nathaniel here? And then I'll return to Jan if he's come back.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Okay, good to meet you.
Yeah, good morning, my time. Yeah. I'm speaking from Atlanta, Georgia, United States of America. I really want to sincerely thank everybody for being part of this steering committee meeting to plan for the 3rd edition of Urban Economic Forum. But having said that, I want to inform us that I've been nominated for the World Economic Forum Young Economic Leadership Program for class of 2022. And I shared it with Alex and he asked me to talk a little about that. Yeah, I'm still young. I'm just 37. And so I love to always carry young people along in whatever I do. My thing, among other things, is for me to see how to take part of urban agenda from developed countries down to developing countries and do the same from developing countries to developed countries. So that's part of the reason why we started Freak Cities too, so we can share some of these ideas and a lot of programs that we can share on the social media platforms. So that's basically what I have to say. So for this forthcoming program, we are going to try to make it live on our platforms. So we'll carry the youth along. And I'm also into real estate. So homes and everything you can talk about is also what I do, because I know youth are also, they are on the receiving end when it comes to homelessness. So whatever impact this is going to make on them, whether positive or not, we will try to pursue that using the media. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Nathaniel, that's really fantastic. I think you already kind of suggested something that I had suggested, that kind of provocation about putting people from different aspects of things into the room together, you know, because if the global south, you know, is not speaking to the developed north, for example, and the developed north has a lot to learn from the global south. From my experiences, there's very little waste in the global south. Everything has a use, and in the global north, we became a very wasteful society, for example. So I think you already made some really excellent suggestions about how we could put together these, you know, these disparate kind of elements. I think that would be really good. I also wondered, because young people, yes, are much more savvy with social media, whether or not we could institute, whether or not we could have a kind of group. So I'm just thinking on my feet here now, but it seems to me that live tweeting from the event would be a really excellent thing to do. And that requires a team. It requires people who know about social media, who know how to do hashtags, who know how to do memes, who know how to gather little quotes, like key phrases that people are saying in the different sessions. And if we could have some kind of, you know, live tweeting going on, and you've probably got other suggestions as well to make, but maybe we need some kind of working group on how we can communicate what is happening in the forum itself. You know, even having people in the panel responding to a Twitter feed as well, which might be, you know, being promoted behind them or whatever. So yeah, I think you've mentioned some really excellent things there. Is Jan Vapavori back with us yet? The Mayor of Helsinki? I keep having programmed meetings with the mayor and missing him. This is a bit difficult. Alex, is he with us or not?
I'm not sure.
No. Okay. All right. I didn't have any other names. So Alex, if you just watch out in case he arrives, okay? Yeah. And then what I'd like to do now is to throw the floor open to responses. I haven't been able to monitor the chat, but I can see that there are 32 messages up there. So I know that lots of people have got responses to this, which is great. Either very supportive responses or questions still to ask. So if you could indicate now who wishes to make a contribution, then Alex, you can help me find them.
Sure, Julie. We got Krishnan and then Barry.
Okay, so Krishnan first, and then Barry. Yeah, Krishnan, give you the floor.
Thank you. I just, it's good that we had the discussion on, the kind of unseen crisis that is mental health, which is something that has been mentioned here, which also has been sort of pointed out by many, including the, Barry also mentioned about how YMCA is possibly working on this. Having said that, what's also interesting is that we need to have, while we are talking about all these things, we need to focus on certain issues in certain countries and certain areas where the crisis has indeed, affected more than elsewhere. For example, India, as you know, we successfully managed the first wave. The second wave became tsunami in many ways, and it's becoming also, they're managing it. So what also, it has exposed is the fault lines that society has when it comes to housing, and so that is where I think the gaps have been made clear in India and elsewhere because of the COVID-19, which is an opportunity for us to learn from how the gaps can be addressed. For example, many have said in the Indian context, the poor infrastructure service delivery has been seen, with the health system spending very little money compared to GDP, et cetera, infrastructure, immigrant workers from cities trying to go back to villages and coming back. So you have the poor infrastructure has one of the things that has been pointed out. Then what is more important, also interesting for Urban Economic Forum, is to see there has been a noticeable lack of data for informed policy making, because for in any country, the whole COVID, managing COVID has been trying to, pilot a plane without knowing how to do it, you see. So midway in the air, they're trying to learn how to fly. So similarly, I think they have been grappling because of the fact that there's lack of data for informed policy making. That's where I think we need to focus on. For example, we do not know therefore how many people on the informal sector, how they're making their livings, how many people are migrating from cities to villages, et cetera. So while what needs to be measured are not being measured. So that's where I think it's an important thing that the focus on data gathering for informed policy making is something that UEF and its partners, and mainly Habitat and others, could work to sort of think about. And also the vulnerable groups' lack of agency or lack of capacity, despite their role in economic growth, because majority of the people in the informal settlements, they contribute a lot to the economic welfare of all the developing countries, from Brazil to Philippines to India to anywhere you say in the developing world. So they're contributing a lot to the economic growth, but their lack of agency. That's when you're talking about youth, or when you're talking about homelessness, these people are indeed contributing the economic growth, but they are not being measured or taken into account. The informal sector is something that we need to be looking into. Certainly for Urban Economy Forum, which is focused on the economy, the contribution, especially of women when it comes to the urban economy in the informal sector, is indeed not measured, which needs to be measured also. Then also the existing inequalities has worsened the sort of, as we said, economic, social, and psychological hardships. Yeah, the women have suffered from the burden of both domestic work as well as the gender-based violence. So we need to be specific on that. Maybe we may say this is not the part of the Urban Economy Forum's business, but we may need to focus on this as well. So I think it is critical that we use Urban Economy Forum to provide impetus for city authorities and governments to rectify these issues. And how do we create an inclusive society, making post-economic, post-COVID recovery as a springboard not as something to mourn all the time, as well as to see sort of a patchwork work. Patchwork doesn't help anymore. So I think it's need to see an overhauling of the economic thinking when it comes to housing is something, removing the archaic rules of converting, how many floor spaces you need, can have, building houses, zoning rules, etc., etc. I will stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think you're identifying some gaps there, Krishna, which is really important, that we have to make sure that the forum focuses on the most on urgent need, really. Barry wanted to speak, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the floor is yours, Barry.
Thanks, Julie. Just a few quick points and building on what I touched on in the chat and the comments you made. I think one of the things that certainly we're seeing is the impact that the pandemic has had on mental health, wellness, belonging in cities around the world. I'm speaking about it, particularly from a Canadian perspective. We have a branch of the YMCA which was actually created by the former founders of Plasticity, which was a happiness-focused startup. And they have created something called YMCA Workwell, which is really focused on well-being in the workplace. But the community has become part of their focus over the last year. And I think there's a real element here that none of us really grasp how coming out of what we've all been through and then coming out of it and what it's going to mean, particularly in the next few years, the impact that is going to have on economies, on communities, and so on. And I think focusing on that would be very timely in light of the fact that, by October, most areas should hopefully be in some sort of wind up coming out of, the worst of COVID. I love the idea of getting social media in as part of this, but I think depending on who you're targeting, we may not just want to use Twitter. We may also want to use Facebook, LinkedIn, and some of the others as well. Instagram, depending on which sessions and who we want to target. I noticed Julie commented on making the sessions more interactive through things like Mentimeter and so on. And I think that's important. One of the things, and I can have a follow-up conversation with you, Alex and Reza afterwards, but I know that we did this for a recent Executive Bureau for United Cities and Local Governments, but just working with a production company that could help take our event from more than just a traditional boring Zoom screen and creating some interesting graphics and so on in terms of how speakers are presented and so on, can just really make it that much more interesting and engaging, because I'm sure all of us have experienced and are living Zoom fatigue, and at some point, particularly if you're participating for 6 or 7 hours, it's just a traditional boring Zoom screen. You start losing people's attention, and so those are some of the things that I think would be really helpful, in addition to the content that we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks for that, Barry. I really agree with you. Alex, are there more people who wish to speak?
Thanks, Julie. I'll just list them in order that I've received. So I have Cersei, Kumaresh, Yvonne, Eleanor, and Sue. So Cersei's next.
Okay, I haven't got all those written down, but Cersei first. Okay, the floor is yours.
Hi. Well, I have been involved with the World Urban Campaign, and recently the Urban Economic Forum submitted to be a partner of the work. And we are developing at work very interesting programs. One called the City Changers, that's mostly individual people who are making difference in the cities related to gender, house, or anything like that. The Climate Changers, because we are in the decade of climate actions. And it's not really best practice, but really interesting experience that are really having impact in cities. And there is also the Urban Thinker Campus that are being developing for years, since 2015. And we are preparing a group of important experience to present to the forum. And I think that will be interesting to look at this experience, or to present those who have more impact on the themes being developed at the World Economic Forum. I don't know what you think about, but I think that we have a very sound experience for all over the world. And I think that WOOC and World Economic Forum could join effort to look at these drivers for changes and experience that are really changing the realities and the cities. That's it.
Thank you. I think what you're proposing, if I'm correct, is a kind of work in progress, yeah? Which I would say is, it's very good for people to see projects which are in action, which maybe haven't finished, which maybe, you know, are still coming up against problems, this kind of laboratory style presentation. I think that's what you're suggesting. And I think that's very important. It's also brave, you know, because it's demonstrating, right, you're still at the front line, you're still tackling the problems, you maybe haven't got all the answers yet, but actually there's a willingness to engage, and that I think is really important for people.
Yeah,
really.
And what I notice also, we have these people doing these exams, but they are still in the same environment. I think they profit a lot if they receive inputs from other different views and from other perspectives as well. And I think that this forum could give this, so we can see some experience and to bring them to have this overall contribution in the forum.
Mm-hmm. So where are you thinking, sorry, where are you speaking from? So where is your project, the project based? I can't remember where you're from.
Well, no, now I am a co-chair of research and academia at the World Urban Campaign. Okay.
And the project that you're proposing, where in the world is it? Where is the project?
That is the thing. At the World Urban Campaign, we have projects all over the world. So they are being presented as best practice of examples. They are being discussed in Urban Thinker Campus. So we have a whole plethora of projects that we could select this project to bring to the forum also as a contribution from the World Urban Campaign initiatives.
Okay, great. That feels a bit to me like the program needs to kind of, I don't know, it feels a bit like I hate to say side event, because side event might confer that it's less important, but in the same way that the lived experience plenary that Lisa was suggesting, which should be open and available to everybody, I think what you're suggesting is also something that should be available to everybody. So maybe there's opportunities to look at the program and have this kind of, you know, this kind of interaction between people from your research program, if you like, the laboratory research programs that are happening right now, so that there's opportunities for all the other UEF participants to have some engagement, rather than it being a sort of parallel panel, which I think would limit it. So something for our programmers to think about, you know, how to manage this.
Recently, we have I went to a forum when they have a garden where they provide serendip meetings of people in this place, and also things called field project, when they invite people to engage in the discussion of the project, so that you have a prior explanation, and then you have all these people giving or providing a discussion over the project. So it will be a kind of field experience, something like that.
Yeah.
A
Great.
participation in ongoing projects.
Yeah. In normal circumstances, we would have field visits probably, wouldn't we? So it's like, how do we now do field visits if we're calling in from different parts of the world? So I think your suggestion is great, actually. Alex, you have to remind me who was next. I only got Cersei's name down.
We have Kumaresh, Yvonne, Eleanor, Sue, and I've added Maddie now.
Okay, so Kumaresh.
Good evening, good morning to everyone. This is Kumaresh Mishra calling or joining in from New Delhi, India. It's the first time that I'm opening my mouth in this forum. I've been observing, and thank you, Ananta, who introduced me to this forum. And my limited point was that, this period that we all spoke about, and Ananta also mentioned, was in terms of the severe impact it had on health-wise, especially in India, New Delhi. I have been trying to keep myself safe all along. So challenging because they're so frightening that should I need any hospital care, I didn't know where to go. So that was the challenge. So that was one aspect. The next is a lot of people have once again migrated. Youth have migrated. Those people who came to, who were working in major urban metropolises, they went back to their villages because that's their point of insurance, where they still have a small hut. They're still sure that they'll get a meal. They're still sure that they'll get some support from nearby. So apart from the health thing, the most important is the impact it has done on the youth who had to migrate from urban centers to rural centers or back to their homes for the migrant labor. Even those who belong to the urban centers have also been severely impacted. Now the challenge is, how do you bring them back? How do you jumpstart them? Some people say the impact of this economic slowdown has been as much as 2008, 2009 meltdown. But you have to recall that this meltdown was more in the developed world, where there's a much better social net. In developing countries, even in India, there isn't that kind of a social net. There is no unemployment insurance, there is no support. Perhaps the only social net is the support from the family. So how do you jumpstart? I think somewhere, I think in the program, that how do you jumpstart, especially the developing world, the impact in the developing world? And somehow, in terms of the most of discussion, pardon me if I'm wrong, is that we are looking at more from the developed countries' urban perspectives. So how do we take some of the learnings from your side that could help in jump-starting the impact in terms of the poorer countries, whether it's India or in Africa or other places? And the urban squalor, the urban economic challenges is perhaps much more in some of these developing countries. So somewhere, I think in most of the items of discussion, somewhere if you can try and put in that how does it impact the developing countries and how one can jumpstart it, how can actually one can do something. So, in terms of real terms, otherwise what happens, we discuss, we give out certain ideas, and when we go next time, we discuss it again. And then we come up with more ideas. Whereas those for whom we are talking, they get left out. So maybe somewhere, I don't know, I'm just trying that, let some of our discussions and examples that will be shared, can we make something that we can try and push to people here, the municipalities here, the mayors here. Unfortunately, the mayors are still not as powerful in this part of the world as mayors in many of the West, whether it's in Canada or US or other places. They aren't as independent, they're not as powerful, they may not have as much of freedom, but nonetheless, one can try and influence them in terms of if you have examples and others. So, you know, something like that. This is my thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what's emerging is a very, very strong request, isn't there, for a real focus on the global south and on the extreme problems there, and to make sure it's practical. Yeah, practical means. I wonder if there might be some kind of way of matching up some of the experts and some of the people with capacity and resources to areas of greatest need, whether or not we could have some kind of mechanism within the forum where, you know, people who've got expertise, got resources, got money, got time, whatever, yeah, could be ideas, you know, could be matching up in a practical way. Sorry, I'm just throwing this out there. It's a, you know, whether or not that's something we could do as the forum, to have that kind of, yeah, to have a kind of, I don't know, skills bank or something, you know, skills bank matching up with skills and resources bank that matches up with need. I think Yvonne was next, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Yvonne Young, Head of Urban Design from City of Brampton in Canada. I'm also part of the leadership from Urban Land Institute, which is one of the world's largest international think tank on city building. So primarily it's trying to convene a meaningful conversation, driving new trends, focusing on how we can benefit both developer, public sector, private sector, and also academia. So I want to share some few thoughts, and perhaps it will be beneficial for the forum to provide some practical solutions, because we know that particularly in certain parts of the world, development is happening very, very quickly. And there's an opportunity to rebuild as we are facing the post-COVID recovery. So I can offer 3 ideas and see, you know, whether it fits with the overall theme of housing. First is how we can incorporate social space in housing. So that is how we can design for triple functions, for living, for working, and for learning. And it's very practical. Every developer is asking that question now. Secondly, is that how we can design with shared balconies. So that is dealing with mental health. And what we learned from COVID is that the isolation, the impact of the isolation is something that we need to be actively dealing with. So how we can design housing in a way that people can see each other, surrounding a centralized courtyard, provide lots of opportunity for people to use those for shared studying and shared working. Thirdly, is that how we can design with easy access to local healthy food. So I have to emphasize this local and healthy. So, and use that to improve affordability. So that means co-living, share kitchen, share meal area, urban agriculture. So what we also see is that through COVID, we see that neighbors actually getting together, they share their backyard, growing food and using food as a source for part of the big recovery. And then the fourth element is that how we can design with gentle intensification, because we know that for housing, what we're constraining is also land and time. And we know that there is a big portion of the development countries that was developed for automobile environment, so that there's a certain mindset and there's a certain optics in terms of maybe getting pushed back to certain kind of, you know, urbanization or intensification. But there's a lot that we can do within the low-rise existing neighborhood, how we can retrofit to make those also into affordable, because it's very practical, and particularly in GTA, we're facing that big issue in terms of affordability. So for example, we have engineers, couple engineers, but they won't be able to afford a place. They will be renting a room. So this is a very practical global dimension that we're dealing with. The second element is how we can design the street as social space. So that is through adopting to the recovery and the reopening, we need to make more space. So how we can create food streets. So that is making the space for people to share food, making the local restaurant, they can bring their business outdoor, but making that into permanent. and also how we can create school streets. So one of the conversations I had with my colleague from Paris is that looking at if it is possible to make all the local school, which is creating all these anchor and the spaces around the school into school streets. Like in other words, there will be no cars. So it's for walking, cycling, for people to play outside, and using the overall community as your learning ground to help people to learn about global competency. So I'm also having conversation with a colleague from Helsinki, looking at how we can really use that to shift using education and food and street and social and housing together to reshape the overall dimension. And then lastly is that how we can design for hyper proximity. So instead of one size fit all, we're really looking at, there is a different sense of proximity for different ages. So there's a research from my colleague from in Paris, in a university in Paris. They are looking at this kind of research of hyper proximity. So I think going back to some of the earlier point made earlier about the importance of data, what we sense is that the decision-making process in the past is that there's a mixture of boundaries and there's a mixture of different sources of data. And what we learn is that there's actually a lot of market data like Environics, which very quickly give us a definitive set of a comprehensive foresight that in our experience, we find that it's really help people to make quicker decision and also agile so they can act very, very quickly. So lastly is the overall metric. So we've been looking at using ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance as the kind of universal metrics, and use that to really quickly shape that developer. You can also benefit from it. People who are doing investment, you can show that this is how responding to climate change, as you are building housing, you can also respond to the social dimension. So I think there's opportunity to use the forum to provide some really practical examples and people who are actively looking for ideas, because they do have those live projects, they can rebuild to improve the bottom line. So I can imagine having a panel comprised of public sector, private sector, academia, the community, but it's really looking at the kind of practical solutions to show that you can make it happen in a year. From concept to getting in the ground, you can make it happen. So that's my thought. Love to hear feedback.
Yeah. Thank you, Yvonne. I think that intersects with a lot of the things that Camilla was saying, you know, designing for social space, really important. I think you articulated something that is quite important, which is housing for well-being.
Yes.
I think I heard you say that, or at least I've written it down. Maybe I inferred it, but we should maybe start talking about that. You know, we should be explicit. Housing for well-being is something that we want to do, we want to promote. And well-being can encompass a whole load of things, you know, which make people feel good, happy, more settled, more at one with themselves, with their surroundings. I did notice one little note that came up in the chat. So somebody saying we haven't talked about arts and culture yet. Well, I am an artist. Okay, my background is working in theatre, working as a writer, using arts as a tool for social change, and it wouldn't be Urban Economy Forum at all if there wasn't an arts input in there. So I did mention it earlier when I responded to Lisa and the idea of a session about lived experience. And because I know there's a fantastic company called Streetwise Opera who are doing extraordinary work with homeless people. But I think that culture, certainly right from the very first Urban Economy Forum, where I was a keynote speaker and helped with the resolution, I made sure that culture is part of the work, part of the it's part of the DNA of the Urban Economy Forum. So whoever thought that we weren't going to be talking about culture, don't worry about that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I respond just very quickly. I can offer two ideas if those are actually real opportunities that developers are looking at. One is that in terms of design for well-being is providing equal access to light, air, and depends on where you are located in the world. So I think that deal with equity, So it's really focusing on providing for passive housing, passive solar gain, that kind of a sustainability dimension. Another piece for our culture is that we are looking at designing the atrium space and using that as pop-up spaces, double up the functions and using that to invite artists to come in. So that apply to both residential, senior housing, and also commercial development. And it's something that developer would love to see, because every day they are trying to find a way to design the ground floor environment a lot more active. So that could potentially be a way to incorporate culture in a meaningful way.
I think it would be quite a good idea. So I'm sensing that maybe we need a few working groups on specific things here. So social media is one of them, but maybe arts and culture might be another one as well, where people can input their contacts, their ideas, their projects. I know we've got a couple more speakers and we're getting short of time now. So Eleanor, I think, was the next speaker.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Eleanor Mohammed. I'm the president of the Commonwealth Association of Planners. So I come to this from a practitioner perspective. I find with these kind of forums and online events, having attended all sorts of them, you know, World Urban Forum, what I really like to see in these kind of events are tangible outcomes and inspiration. And if you're a practitioner at this point, we've kind of heard it all, and it's really hard to pull on those threads and put it into practice. So, you know, something that we could really work with would be excellent. Earlier this year in February, the Commonwealth Association of Planners and a number of other partners put forth a call to action on sustainability and rapid urbanization. So I would love to see us be able to come out with some additions and building on, like, what do we really need to tell our governments to see the change that we really need. So that's something that I would be looking to build on. One area that I'm finding through all these conversations that I have across different disciplines and professions is there's a real lack of understanding and many of us turning a blind eye to technology and what's coming. You know, whether it's autonomous vehicles, whether it's different apps, whether it's scooters, you name it, there's all sorts of things involved. You're using GIS, how it actually should be used instead of just making pretty maps with it. There's so much possibility with technology. But as we've learned, there's a lot of other questions around it, from equity, you know, to ethics and how we use it. There's many municipalities around the world who have ideas coming in from the private sector for their municipalities, for public funding, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't have the structures in place that allow for innovation in their municipality from a governance perspective. So what I want to propose is that somewhere in the Urban Economy Forum, and I would be more than happy to facilitate this, that there be some sort of workshop that has a discussion about innovation and technology and how we can brainstorm and see that working both in global north and global south. Because even what we're seeing, and I will talk from the planning perspective, in the planning world, many practitioners are online and they're often talking about cities. Downtown, let's say Toronto as an example. So they'll talk about all the things that can be applied in Toronto, and then all the other practitioners are looking at it going, yeah, that's great. And then they try and implement the same sort of things in their smaller cities or throughout the region, and it just doesn't work. You know, City of Toronto, let's use those electric scooters as an example. Downtown City of Toronto, there's lots of people on the sidewalk. Do you have space for electric scooters? Maybe, maybe not. But out in the more suburban municipalities, you have the sidewalks and you have the space, and maybe electric scooters are a good form of transportation there. So in other words, facilitating a conversation that starts to look at solutions not just for city centers, but city region, and how the interaction is with rural environments, and coming up with practical solutions for the public sector, regardless of the size of your organization, of how you can start to welcome and evaluate whether these new technologies are going to work for your community and your public. So for me, that's really where I would like to start focusing, not just through the Commonwealth Association of Planners, through my own practice, and as many forums as I can think of to get this conversation going, because for me, it has really been missing. And it's not just a global north thing. We've just recently had projects go on in Africa where we've been able to identify and measure informal settlements just by using simple GIS applications. The solutions are out there, and I would like to provide an opportunity for attendees, so not just the academics, but those at the top of their field, to talk about and raise their voices about how technology can change their lives.
Brilliant.
So that's what I'm proposing. Thanks.
Thank you, Eleanor. That's great, because that's a really practical proposal. Before we move to Sue, who I think is going to speak next, I just want to respond before I forget that I've been involved with the Internet Governance Forum, and I think that it would be really interesting to take a workshop or a panel or a project, a paper from Urban Economy Forum about this work to the Internet Governance Forum, because that is a place where we can also influence issues around internet. And I've been several times as a parliamentary delegate, but I never heard anything about this being discussed at IGF. So there's maybe an opportunity there. Okay, and I think Sue is the last person on my list at the minute. Is Sue still here?
Hi, Julie, thanks.
Yeah, go on, Sue.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Moody, and I'm mayor of the town of Twisp in Washington State. I'm also chair of the, well, I should say president, I suppose, of the Association of Washington Cities, representing all the cities and towns across the state of Washington, and also vice chair of the Western Municipal Association, representing 14 different states in the Western US. So I will say that the comments right now resonated very deeply with me. I really like the idea of tangible outcomes and inspiration for this conference. I think it's really important. I think the focus I'd like to see should be on solutions oriented and more actionable items to help really help us to get to where we are hoping we will get globally, and that is addressing the housing issues. That being said, I feel that housing affordability and homelessness, what would help us from the local government perspective is really a little bit more integration, I suppose, and assistance for those listening to help engage, basically, to see how we can engage the potential and necessary partners that we really need, not those that are already doing the work on the ground and already at the table, but rather those who are not. And that, you know, whether it be private sector investors or policy development, I guess government officials, even from various levels of government. We at the local level see it every day. We live it every day. But what we don't have is maybe the partners necessary for us to really work collaboratively together. I'd like to see this forum really bring the ideas of collaboration together a little bit more, and deal with it so that we can actually all work together and inspire us at the local level to really find those solutions, because I do think it needs that deep collaboration. And then finally, my second point is really to say that I believe that we really need to make this more inclusive. And what I mean by that is, I think Eleanor and you, Julie, just mentioned it. It's not just a focus on the largest cities, but also the towns and villages of all sizes, because really the tools that are available for those not only in inner city, large urban areas are varied. And so whether we have the financial resources or even the human resources on the ground really determines what progress might look like. And so we focus only on those larger entities, we're really missing a large part of the world. And I think as a small town mayor, I can say that, scale is really a big deal. And so we need to match the resources that we have and recognizing and identifying those that we don't, so that we can hope to gain them and create that awareness. So thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's comments.
Yeah, thanks. So we had a fantastic conference last year on towns and regions, and also in the writing of the resolution, we've been really explicit about the important link between towns and between cities and small cities and towns and rural hinterland, if you like. So maybe we just need to put more effort, I think, into that. Sharon, I think, is going to speak next. Correct. Got Sharon, then Doug, then Peter. Aware of the time.
Mattie's also with it.
Matty, sorry, Matty.
Okay, sorry. So does Matty go first?
Yeah. Well, Matty's on my list first. Sorry, I should do it on my list. Matty, then Sharon, Doug, and Peter. Okay, Matty.
Thank you, Julie. I'll be very brief because my comments really echo what Sue and Eleanor and Yvonne have said. I think that from listening to this discussion, I think the forum is really trending in the right direction. I think this is exactly what we should be doing. And it gets at what a forum really is. And a forum is a place for people with different views and from different perspectives to discuss. And essentially, we're trying to, in some ways, do two things at once. And I hear it coming out in these discussions. One is to let 1,000 flowers bloom of ideas. Each of us come from, have different areas of specific specialization. And we want to create spaces where each of those can happen. And we're also trying to then zero in on some really tangible actions. And for me, two themes have stood out, which I think will make this really the key meeting place for people about cities. One is this idea of lived experience that Mayor Helps talked about, that this can't just be a place where experts come and discuss amongst ourselves. I think that will be a missed opportunity, and the proposals on the table, very tangible proposals that have been put forward by many people through the chat and in discussion, I think will make this a place where different perspectives and different people are coming together. And the second one, the second idea that Eleanor and Sue talked about is really being action oriented. That that what we're hearing now are ideas of how we turn this from a place where we talk to a place where we guide action. And I think that is so important and something that will make this forum, both as a forum, indispensable, and as something that people look back on and say the reason it's indispensable is because of who was there and because those people took the learnings and the experiences and the networks that they built through this forum and turned them into very tangible action. So just to echo Mayor Helps' proposal to have, perhaps instead of a statement, a call to action at the end, I think that's a great suggestion. And I think, based on who's on this call from the global north, the global south, I think involving people with lived experience, there's so much opportunity here to make this really a place where change happens.
Thank you, Matty. Sharon?
Yes, thank you so much for having us in this meeting. I have to echo everyone and say congratulations to the team for putting forward such a strong draft agenda, which we can all build on. As many of you, I think we've been going through a lot of meetings, and I have to say that the common thread in the meetings that I've been on today have been discussions around youth, around looking at who has been most affected by COVID, and also looking at who have not been considered, or the invisible populations within our cities. And I think the homeless population would be included in that demographic, the most vulnerable populations of our city. I would like to add as well a fourth area. In our discussions of well-being and the vulnerable groups, the connection with environmental issues is really quite strong. So vulnerable populations are most impacted by negative environmental impacts. They are the most affected by COVID impacts, for example. And I think we need to make that connection as a common thread through discussions. And we're happy to, as UNEF, we're happy to help and work together with colleagues to strengthen the panels and to weave this into the overall narrative.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. And Doug next, and then Peter.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Doug Reagan. I'm with UN Habitat in the Human Rights and Social Inclusion Unit. Two pieces. One, I just want to strongly support the inclusion of the arts. I think that's critical, and also just as a voice for young people and marginalized communities. I also would strongly encourage that arts be used as a way to bring issues to the fore, but also just as entertainment. I think these events can just be panel after panel after panel after panel, and we have many, many artists from the north and the south that could be great. The second one, and a bit more hard-hitting, I think, is that we have to take into account what the pandemic has shown us. It's the gross inequities and specifically the issues of racism, sexism, homophobia. These are the communities that have been hammered by this. And I think what we've seen, whether it be the racism against Asians in the United States, whether it be the systemic racism against Indigenous people, which has been brought forward by the Graves and Kamloops, or whether what just happened with the murder of a family, almost a whole family, a Muslim family in Canada. We can't let this. It is what frames the last year, I think, as much as anything, and it happens as much as anything in the cities. And I think we have to. I would suggest have a panel on it. I would suggest have a speaker on it, and it really should be woven in throughout everything we're doing, because it really is framing what's happening right now. And I think it's front and center. I'm just reading the papers in Canada right now. With all the vigils happening, different vigils happening over the last 10 days. So just wanted to bring that forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. You know, and here in the UK, we also saw the toppling of a statue in Bristol, the statue of a slave owner, a man who made his money and whose name was still associated with a whole variety of civic a big concert hall was named after him, streets and various other things. So I think that this is still resonating, isn't it? It's really important, and we're seeing all kinds of racist attacks here in the UK as well. And in fact, you know what Trump did by calling the virus the China flu, he actually provoked a horrendous form of xenophobia in our country as well, which we haven't previously seen so much of. Right, Peter, I think might be the last speaker. We don't have much time left, so Peter, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you, Julie, and thank you to the other members of the steering committee. I help to lead an organization which may be a bit of an outlier in this discussion, but because we're overtly focused on rural communities around the world. And I would just encourage, as the discussions evolve, and as I note that the agenda has already been set for October event, that we think about ways to remind ourselves about one of the unintended consequences we've seen in the pandemic, which is the strain that is caused on supply chains. And what we know about supply chain system is that it very much is reinforced by rural-urban linkages. So it causes us to really reflect, or it should suggest that there's an opportunity to reflect on the role of underinvestment in rural economies, rural communities, and the way in which that sponsors the type of rapid urbanization and the strains that and the stresses that we've all been kind of talking about. So my background is that of an architect. I've worked extensively on urban issues, and I think I just want to ensure that what remains part of our discussion is a systemic approach in which we obviously stay committed to the area of urban economies, but we look with a slightly broader, and I would argue, systemic lens at the way in which rural communities or the underinvestment that takes place there actually has a critical role to play in how we address some of the many concerns that we're all talking about in the urban system.
Okay, thank you. I did see that Narayan was also down to speak, so I'll give the floor to Narayan now. Thanks, Peter.
Hi, good evening. I just chatted a couple of points. I was not planning to speak, but I think I saw a message from Alex. I think my perspective is that we had a discussion on the similar subject in the last conference. And for example, I presented a paper on the same subject. I'm just wondering, because I'm a professional work in the similar area for many decades. During my studies, I studied basically on housing the poor. Is one of my theses on my work on. Now we have been talking about the subject for a very long time. And if you look at the policies, you have cluttered policies across the globe on housing the poor for the affordability and the affordable housing. My simple submission is that instead of we talk about, there's a lot of great ideas will come from discussion. The problem remains the same, even though this is much talked about subject over the period, over the last few decades. The problem remains one of the most serious problems today. What are we trying to bring in the conference, which was different from the last conference or many other conferences we had in the last many years? For example, if you look at any international body, we do talk about the housing poor and the huge amount of literature available. Some of the policies worked, many policies didn't work. So my humble submission to our colleagues are, is it possible instead of being another conference on the same subject, which we discussed over the decades, are we able to really bring out certain kind of, can we come up, agree on what are the major outcomes that we can expect out of this conference? Now the pandemic and the climate change bring new dimension to the same problem. It was earlier socioeconomic divide, which was the major cause for the urban poor or the affordability housing issue, housing vulnerability issue. Now we have a pandemic, we have a climate change, new dimensions are getting added to it. I'm just wondering, can we agree on a couple of major outcomes that we can expect out of the conference instead of being another conference? That is what my submission to the team is. Can we agree upon that? What are we trying to come out of this conference? If we can, the conference topic is very comprehensive. I don't find any problem there. But we have been discussing today, the whole major discussion is on affordability, or the housing affordability, or housing vulnerability. So if we can come up with some agree on what are the things that we are trying to achieve, different from the earlier conferences, which have been there for every year, we have international conference, the same subject. So if we can agree on that, that would be a great thing. As far as personally, I feel that, because this is a subject, myself attended many conferences, honestly, same subject. The World Bank, where I work, we do have a similar kind of dimensions to that, but we look at the private sector, the public policy failed. So we are trying to bring in private sector into the housing. We have a larger number of financial instruments available across the world, and some worked, some didn't work. We do have a lot of experience of bringing formal financial institutions with informal financial institutions, like a microfinance institution. We are trying to work that kind of linkages. Some worked, some didn't work. So the point is that if we can look at that and we can come up with some kind of a distinct outcome that we can expect out of this conference, it will be wonderful. This is my humble submission. There is nothing, there is no other value addition to that. I've written that, I tweeted that, because I feel that over the last few years, I did my graduation in housing. I'm a planner. I worked for many years. And the last conference I submitted a similar subject, same topic. I given a paper. We discussed that. The only thing is that we didn't put much of a focus on pandemic. We did discuss last time pandemic as well, how the vulnerability get accentuated with the COVID pandemic. It's all available in the huge amount of literature available, already available in the domain. And I find the policy cluttering so much in urban housing or affordable housing. We have plenty of literature available, academic and non-academic. So this is all my submission on that. I was not planning to speak on this, But since Alex has put up a note that I thought I will share my mind. With
Okay,
full
now
respect,
I think
everybody.
what
Thank you.
you do, I think what you've done is just to confirm really what came out of the discussion already, which is that we need to be action orientated and solution focused. I think that's really important. Now I noticed that it is now time for really we should be ending right now. I think there is going to be something else on the agenda after this, Alex, but I think it might have to be very brief. Was it about the resolution?
Yes, I believe it's best to wrap up. It is 11:30.
Yeah, I agree. I have another meeting, so yeah. But you have masses of fantastic ideas there. If the chat can be captured, were you recording? I don't know, but anyway, we have a record and I've been making notes and lots of people also. There was one practical question, which is, could the deadline, the June 15th deadline be extended? Because I think just the conversation today has identified some gaps and some opportunities. So some of us might want to go away and still nominate people. So is that possible or not?
Yeah, I did respond to the question. That's definitely something we can consider.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Right. Well, the conversation's complete for now, but everybody still has Alex's email address. So I think if I just leave you just for the final words then, Alex, I don't know if you need to pass on to anybody else. I really have to go because I have another meeting. So.
Thank you so much, Julie.
All right.
Perhaps, thank you, Julie, for the chairing the meeting. Reza, did you have any final statements you want to say before we close the meeting?
No, time is over. I appreciate all of you to participate, and we are working and we are keeping in touch with you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.